Welcome back to episode 4 of Cities Skylines 2, where we'll talk about zones and signature buildings. The format will be what you already know. We'll go through the video and we'll pause along and look at some things, talk about some details, and at the end, I'll add any other information that we might have in the dev diary as well. And we will try to cover as much as possible, even things that are not usually related to this episode, but we might have seen in this footage. We might talk about that as well. So let's jump into it.
Every decision you make weaves a thread into the fabric of your city. But don't for a second imagine a smooth, seamless surface. Cities don't work like that. Instead, it's an urban patchwork marked by the realities of life and living.
I love this bridge here. I just want to stop and appreciate all the water reflection in there and this tiny little bridge that we have over here.
You'll create and stitch it together with zoning. Zoning lets you decide where people live and work. You create these residential, commercial, and industrial zones with zoning tools.
First pause of the day so we can take a look at what we have in here. So at the top there, you have we are selected the residential zone, and then we have the overlay for residential buildings. So as you can see, the green ones are residential buildings. You also have residential signature buildings, which I can't see any in here, but I will touch on that a little bit later. I just don't know what these icons mean. Might be that there is still vacancy on those buildings, but I'm not completely sure about that. You also have residential suitability. By the way, you have that for each of the zones in there, but we are seeing residential, so we're talking about residential. And the suitability is from bad, which is the red color, to green. I can't see any green, maybe over here and over there. And what that basically means is that the better suited area where you get more money from what they're calling now rent instead of tax, as we had before in the Cities Skylines 1, that'll be higher as well. And potentially land value will increase easier in those areas. And then we have ground pollution, and this changes depending on the view that we have in there. And ground pollution in here is the key for residential, because residential don't like pollution, and you should avoid building in those areas. You also have the themes over here, so you can select between European or American, and some types of tools, which are the same as the ones that we have in Cities Skylines 1. So you have the buckets, you have the drag and drop, and you have one icon per area. This one, you would be able to increase that in size and you paint the area, but this one, you just do one square each time.
They work in a couple of different ways.
And just to show you, we do have commercial. As I mentioned, same thing. The difference here is customers. So usually for commercial, being closer to residential is always the better option, because they are very close to people that want to buy their goods, and also being close to industry also adds value to that, because it's cheaper to ship things into those the commercial buildings as well. And then if we move this a little bit further, we have industrial, commercial. I don't think we are seeing the industrial there in there, but that's all right. Let's take a look at the tools in here in the tool mode.
Click and drag over cells on the map to zone large rectangular areas. Zone all adjacent cells with one click. Or get granular, zoning a neighborhood cell by cell.
It's all basically the same. The only difference is that you don't have an extra option to remove the zoning anymore. With the option selected in here in the tool mode, you can just press the right click. You also had that in Cities Skylines 1, but now that's your only way to remove zoning. I think it's just worth calling that out, because you won't see that option there anymore.
When you establish a city...
Whoops, let's go back a little bit, because we have the first menu for the game. So this is how it will look like when you join it. First things first, log into your Paradox account and receive the medieval castle for free. there you go. You can get an extra asset for free straight away. You have the option to continue your last game, a new game. You can load any game that you saved before. You have the editor. This is an interesting one, Paradox mods. I don't know if this would be kind of a mod manager for any mods that you download from the Steam collection, or if you are able to get mods from Paradox itself. If it is, it might be a game changer, especially for console players. I have no idea what that is. I've been up from there is just, I'm just considering a few options in here. Might just be the Steam mods that we have, and this is just where you see all of them. But yeah, that's your option. Talking about option, you have options, credits, and exit to leave the game. But the next screen as well, it's quite a nice one, which is where you select your actual map in there. So at the moment, we have 12 options in here. This includes the additional map that we have on the pre-order at the moment. And as you can see, we have things like each one will have their own theme. I'll go back to hear what they're saying, but this one is North American, that other one is European. You have the climate in there. You have the latitude, like northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, and that's the only ones that I've been able to see at the moment. They just show these three top ones. You have the buildable area of the map, which is important for you to decide which is the best option for you to actually build, and outside connections. And as you can see, you can buy power from your neighbors, looking at this icon in here. You also have natural resource. So basically, I think this is fertile land for farming. This is forestry or industry and oil industry over there. And then after this, when you select your map, you have these map options where you give your city a name. You select the theme. Again, you have the European and American. I don't know if they'll add more. I would love to see more in there. You have left-hand traffic. That's the only way to go, as you know it. And you do have natural disasters built in. Now, I don't know if this covers all the natural disasters that we had in the first DLC for Cities Skylines, namely thunderstorms, forest fire, meteor strike, and tornado, and things like that. I don't know if it covers all of that, or if it's something different, earthquake and all the others. You have the option to unlock all, which is to unlock all the buildings. You have the option for unlimited money. You don't have the options for unlimited research, natural resource. So I don't know how that's gonna work. I don't know if that's the Paradox mods then. Might be, might not be. You have the option to enable disable tutorials, which is also welcome. But let me go back a little bit and let's keep with the video in there.
Establish a city, you choose a map. The map's theme dictates if your city's buildings will have a North American or European architectural style.
Just one more thing that I forgot to mention. The theme in here will affect the style of buildings, service vehicles, and roads, road signs, and traffic lights. For buildings, you can still select when you have the painting tool or the bucket tool or whatever you're using, and we'll see that later. You can still select the different style in there, but this affects how things are gonna look in your city.
You can now use zoning tools to mix it up. Go on, sprinkle a little North American flair into your European city, or vice versa.
There you
okay,
go.
you know how zoning tools work, but what can you zone? Well, let's start with residential zones. The places and spaces where citizens relax with friends, raise families, and rest their heads at after.
Really nice assets in here with a lot more details than we had before. A lot of flags in here. I believe they are from Finland, correct if I'm wrong, but I think someone mentioned on one of my TikToks that that's where they're from. And I quite like seeing some of these in here. You have satellite dishes, you have chimneys, you have solar panels in there, you have whatever this is in here. You have fence, you have pergolas, you have like tables outside. There's so much details in these buildings. It's really, really nice to see the amount of details they have in here. It's also worth mentioning that lower level buildings, they won't have as many details intentionally for them to look a little bit low income buildings, whether higher levels, which pays more rent, as they call it in here, which was taxed before, they will look a lot more modern and have a lot more details as well, bringing up that land value with them.
There are now 6 residential zone types. 2 will be familiar: low-density housing, detached houses for single families, and high-density housing, tall towers packed with residents.
Up to here, all good. We know all about that. So 6 zonings in total, but 2 of them are the same as before, low and high capacity. But things are about to get interesting. First of all, before we talk about the new zoning, I love this for sale sign in here. Now buildings, they will change quite a lot more the number of people living in there. The same with jobs on commercial and industrial. Depends on the demand in the city, they'll go up and down, but that'll be a little bit more dynamic than it was before. And what I don't know is if when there is no one living there or there are vacancies in the building, if that for sale sign is there, and when people actually moves in, if they remove it. But again, lots of details on those buildings. You have like some vents, you have some air conditioners in there, plenty of things in here for you to look at. Really like it.
Zoning types include medium-density row housing and medium-density apartment buildings.
So 2 medium-density low, and medium-density apartment buildings.
There's low-rent housing now too. Huge apartment buildings with tiny apartments.
This is all for rent buildings. This is one big question that I have. Are they just calling it rent to replace the word tax and this be more like a little bit more modern with how things work, because not everyone owns it, and these low income, high density buildings for rent, it's like there's a lot of capacity because it's very small buildings or living areas. And I don't know if it's just how they're calling it, or if actually renting and buying properties will play a different role in the game.
Finally, there's mixed housing. Here, residents live in apartments above ground floor shops.
And officially confirming mixed zone zoning. So I love this building. You can also see that you have corner buildings now, and you have commercial at the bottom and the residential at the top.
Mixed housing adds next-level realism because homes and shops rub elbows like most real-world city centers. Ready to talk business? You'll create dedicated commercial zones where companies sell the locally produced and imported goods people need and want. Your commercial zones are...
I think I just want to go back a little bit just to confirm a few things. Again, on commercial here, you have the theme in there. You have the overlays over here, and one of the biggest changes, I think, in the way everything works is how different types of zones interact with each other and the role that they play in the city as well. Before, everything was very abstract in terms of like you do have residential need a place to work and a place to shop, and then you add commercial needs a place to create the goods that they need. So we add industrial, which does provide those goods and those workplace for people. And adding those create demand for more people, and so on. You get the gist. Now, it's kind of the same vibe, obviously, because that's how this actually works. But there's a lot more to that, because there are different types of goods that industry, offices, and commercial will actually need and produce. Some offices will take goods from industry, for example, and transfer that into not a consumable good. For example, I think it was drinks or soda or whatever that's called. It actually transformed into entertainment. So it actually uses as an entertainment value for people utilizing or using that specific building. Although, while you also have things like food and that you can actually directly sell to customers, so you're selling the good itself. The same vibe goes for industry, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that works, especially for offices, because offices, I think, will play a role that we didn't have in Cities Skylines 1, and that will be quite interesting.
Your commercial zones are also where citizens and tourists eat out, catch the latest blockbuster, and dance until dawn. You'll establish industrial zones with
Big thing in here. I think this area is actually you actually draw the area of the extraction. I think this is extraction ore. This was a very similar building from what we had before, and I don't know exactly how that all works, but we have a little bit more of an insight on agricultural buildings, and we will talk about that as well. But this is a big thing, and that will make it much better. Because before, what you had was you had to put like several of these buildings one next to each other, and it's not an area of effect. It's just where the building was. So I think this will be really nice. And on the industry overlay here that we didn't see before, we do have industrial suitability, so that the road color. We have groundwater deposits. Now, I don't know exactly if that's to avoid polluting the water, the groundwater in the region, but I think it is. And wind speed and direction as well to help you see where the pollution is all going to.
factories, workshops, and warehouses, where businesses can store goods ready for distribution or export.
Now, that's another important point in here that she's talking about warehouse as well. So for some buildings, especially manufacturers, you will be better off having those warehouses because usually they can't sell that straight away. And what they do, they send that to warehouse and they don't have like much storage on the building itself. So sending it to a warehouse gives them the opportunity to sell for a better price to a better place and make more profits and increase not just the industry income, but your income as well.
Ready for distribution or export. You'll also develop office zones. Here you'll find small, low-density buildings with only a few businesses in operation. You'll also get the glittering, high-density towers that
Love these buildings from the offices. So just confirming, commercial, you have the 6 different types of zoning. You also have mixed zoning. You have commercial, industry, and offices. And for those, you have 2 types of zoning for low and high density. And these buildings look fantastic. And I love that we have both low density and high density for offices as well. This will make things a lot more interesting, and you'll be able to add more offices in other areas other than just like your downtown or in some busy areas with high density buildings. Otherwise, they would feel out of place like they did in Cities Skylines 1.
Find your city's silhouette in the sky. Growing your city and zoning go hand in hand. Here's an example. You zone residential areas that boost the population, and with it, the demand for jobs. You respond by creating an industrial zone.
There we go. That's what I was talking about. This is an industry in the agricultural industry. As you can see, you have the level of the building, or I don't even know how to call it, but I'll call level of the building. You have the efficiency, you have number of employees, the name of the company, the address over there, and what it's producing. In this case, it's vegetables. Noise it produces. I still don't know what those icons mean, but yeah. But you can see that in here, it's actually drag and dropping, and you can see that drag node to move it, and you can actually define the area of your industry, in this case, your farm. And when you finish, it rezones and reshape the area and gives you this beautiful, beautiful farm. I love that you can do it. I was really, really wishing for that a long, long time. but I'll even put it behind so you can see that again.
You respond by creating an industrial zone with factories where people get to work. Now, these factories produce goods, but they won't stay in business long without somewhere to sell them. You solve that problem by expanding commercial zones. You see? Each zone.
I just want to show you something else in here.
Now, these factories produce goods.
Because this shows you exactly what is the commercial suitability in there. As you can see, these are all residential buildings and the suitability expands over here. I believe it's because of this road that comes in there, and zoning in here will make it easier for this business to sell and to basically function and produce more money to your city. So now everything that you do, housing that you provide, the business that you provide, the industry that you provide, all will have a much bigger factor in creating income for your city. And that might be one of the reasons why from time to time the money in the city is quite low, because that it seems like it changes quite a lot every time you build something. I think it tends to change quite dramatically, especially with the size of the area that you build. And obviously, the more houses, the more availability, so prices go down until you fill all of that. If everything is filled up, the price goes up because competition is higher. But I think it's important to mention, and I'll talk a little bit more about that there is homeless people that can occupy vacant buildings, by the way. So this is something quite interesting, and I bet like most of you would love to avoid that happening.
By expanding commercial zones. You see? Each zone.
Sorry, but one more thing in there. Have you noticed how cool it is when you're building that you have this crane in here? That's just such a nice touch.
In commercial zones. You see? Each zone helps create the momentum you need to realize the city of your dreams. And it wouldn't be the city of your dreams without signature buildings. These are unique residential, commercial, industrial, and office buildings that you unlock as your city expands.
There you go. Each zoning that we do, that we have their signature buildings. So those signature buildings will unlock depending on some milestones and some other factors in your city. They are free to put in your city when you unlock them. And they also give you some types of bonus that can be increasing industry production, could be improving the well-being around the region, could be adding more education throughout the whole city. There's a lot of things there that will help everything grow in your city or in the area around that building. So it's quite interesting to see things like that in the game as well. And that will bring a lot of customization options for specific areas that you build. So you have like one building that's quite different from everything else, or that stands out from everything else that you have in that area, which is usually quite nice when you are building some areas and you have like, oh, this is like, you know, that building, like you know where to go when someone mentions the name of the building. And I think that's exactly what you were going for here.
They're free to build, and you can plop them anywhere. Plop. It's Cities Skylines lingo. Go on, say it. Plop. What's so special?
I just love it. Like they got me there. Like it's pretty cool.
Plop them anywhere. Plop. It's Cities Skylines lingo. Go on, say it. Plop. What's so special about signature buildings? Well, they function like any zoned building. A home for people, a warehouse for industry, an office for workers. But they can elevate the neighborhood in unique ways. Signature buildings can also bring citywide benefits. Zone and place your signature buildings carefully so each city district flourishes and plays its part in the success of the whole city. Life's rich tapestry has never been richer than in Cities Skylines 2.
And there we have it. And look at that fantastic skyline with the lights reflected on the water in there. This looks so good. I really enjoying this so far, and I hope you are as well. Every week there's some amazing news coming out from on the game, and I can't wait to put my hands on it. But let's dive a little bit more into the dev diary and cover some more things that we might haven't seen in the video or are a little bit more explained. They cover every single item in the dev diary. I highly recommend you reading that as well. For example, the zoning tools, the few marquee or paint tools that we seen to be able to zone. The dezoning, they also mention about that. They also talk about the theme or architectural themes for the buildings, and that you can have an European or North American cities, and you can actually mix that into the city when you are actually zoning the area. We also cover the zone types, so low density housing and high density housing. Something that we haven't mentioned is that the medium density row housing, they are actually wall-to-wall homes, and they look quite a lot like the wall-to-wall buildings in Cities Skylines 1. They're not as modern as those buildings. They look a lot more like the North American or European buildings like that. But it's lovely to see that you have a mid layer in there, and you just don't have like small or big buildings. You know, you have like that transition that you can create. Obviously, to finalize the zone type for residential buildings, they talk about the low rent housing, which provides large apartment buildings, housing lots of small apartments. So low rent housing is especially useful for low income residents, such as students and young adults who have moved out of their parents' house to live in their own first apartment. So age and what citizens actually do and how they live all will influence how your city actually function. So if you have single people, they won't bother moving to a smaller apartment. But if you have a family, they will prefer bigger apartments or house to move into. And obviously, it's more expensive for each individual family to live in smaller buildings, because the smaller the buildings, the less people you have in that. For example, the small density for the low density, I should say, for housing, they actually have just one household per building. So that means that that family will pay the full rent for that or the full tax for that building. And if you have a big building with a lot of people living there, that actually they pay less because the cost of the building to maintain the building is divided by everyone living there is actually lower. So I hope that makes sense. And that's why I'm saying it's probably very useful to read through the whole dev diary, because it gives you a lot of insight on how all of this is actually going to work. We also cover mixed housing. Part of that cost is covered by or tax or rent. I'll start talking just about rent because that's the language they're using. That's what we'll see in the game, and that makes things easier. But the commercial business will pay parts of the rent, and the other part is paid by the house in there. So it's basically just how you, when you see the statistics for your city, you know what's the breakdown in there. And for mixed housing, you do actually have a breakdown between commercial and residential there, paying for the rent. Now, commercial buildings, as we know, will sell all types of goods manufactured locally or imported from outside connections. I don't know if it will make a big difference what they sell, but it's telling that this includes everything from cars and groceries to clothes and paper products. And they also provide citizens with leisure options in the form of restaurants, movie theaters, bars, hotels, and a lot more. So that is, if they're mentioning it, I would say it's important, but at the same time, I don't know if they're just trying to kind of bring how these actually work in real life into the game, just to explain why that works in that specific way. So I don't really know if that'll play a part or not, but that's what they're saying. And the major difference between low and high density, apart from the size, are that the types of companies and the volume of goods they are able to sell. Low density business are usually boutiques, gas stations, small stores, and bars, while high density, they tend to be supermarkets, department stores, and various recreational locations, such as fitters, and hotels. So obviously, small business employ fewer workers, and the large business will employ more, and the amount of goods they will sell will also depend on their size. So no news there, I would say. As I mentioned, they benefit from local manufacturing as they have quick access to goods they're selling, and the local manufacturers also benefit from nearby commercial companies because of the cost of transportation that we covered in the previous dev diary as well. Now, industrial zones, as we mentioned, they are now divided between manufacturing companies and warehouse. So manufacturing are most of the industrial zones as factories and workshops, while warehouse will just be like just a few buildings, not everywhere. So the warehouse will basically store the produced goods that are ready to be shipped further, but are still waiting for transport or finding suitable buyers. They always try to sell things to locally before exporting to outside connections as well, because again, that's cheaper and they make more money. And some goods are sold to commercial business who will then sell them to customers, while others, the business will further convert them into immaterial goods. That's the word that they're using and that I want to remember. And they say beverage, that's the word they're using as well. That will turn into entertainment. It's also important to say that companies in general seek to reevaluate their business every now and then, adjusting the number of employees to match the current business landscape and market needs. The same works with commercial buildings, and the level of education play a role in there. That depends on the level of the building, and the more educated people, the higher the productivity of the building as well. Now, office zones, they will produce goods, but they will produce only the immaterial goods and services for private citizens and companies. They will convert technological goods manufactured in industrial zones into software, and further into other immaterial goods as telecom, finance, and media. So I think that's an interesting change in there. Off-zone companies include banks, electronic retailers, law firms, insurance companies, and telecommunication companies. Software is an important type of material goods for both the industrial and office sectors as they produce various goods. However, software in itself isn't sold to private customers. Other goods produced from software, such as telecom and finance, have a wider reach as private customers also benefit from them. So it's not the software that you're selling, they're selling the goods produced from that software. Some examples of media that's sold to citizens are consumer electronics, video games, and all the likes. Now, there is a lot of information about zone demand, and I won't cover every single details in there, but I will talk about one thing or another. They talk a lot about some of the things that we already covered in the video, but they also say that we can adjust taxes, but now they're using taxes in here. That makes me think that rent and tax might be something different. I really don't know. So adjusting taxes for different education levels, as well as the various goods produced and sold in the city, can have a great effect on local demand. I think basically, very likely, like the Cities Skylines one, if you increase taxes, people, for example, for residential, people won't move as much. If you decrease taxes, people will want to move more often because it's more attractive for them. You can use the taxes to control demand for residential, commercial, offices, and industry. And this is the area that I think it's the most important from the demand. And I'll read this little paragraph for you. Residential zone demand also increases as jobs in the industrial, commercial, and office sectors become available. The zones require a workforce, and as a new workers moving, the demand suitable housing. When unemployment increases and jobs are available, residential demand decreases until the issues are fixed. If the city has a large number of built but unoccupied homes, residential demand can decrease until the available homes become occupied. Now, this is where it gets very important. And I said one paragraph, but it's actually two. So land value is directly related to the rent that they pay. So if the citizens are not able and willing to pay higher rents, the rent decreases, which also affects the land value around the building. Residents will move out if the living costs are too high and they don't feel like their needs are met in the area where they live, and some will even move out of the city. However, if the residents continue to not be able to meet the rent costs, the building will start to deteriorate as no money is used for the building's basic upkeep. The residents then move out in greater number and the building becomes abandoned. This further decreases the land value. Abandoned buildings can become occupied by homeless citizens, but due to the constant disrepair, the building will eventually collapse. That's a lot to take in here. So that is land value, building decreasing or deteriorating throughout the time, people not paying the rent, which means I believe that you don't get that income. And then you have abandoned buildings, and abandoned buildings can still be occupied by homeless citizens, and abandoned buildings actually collapse because they are not being maintained. So this is a huge change on how all these zonings and the buildings actually work in Cities Skylines. There is one more thing that is quite interesting and that changed quite a lot, which is city specialization. So companies working with the same materials and producing similar products benefit from each other's proximity. Industries and offices concentrated on areas where similar companies already exist. They communicate with each other and have a better chance to hire specialized workers to increase the efficiency. As more and more companies produce the same types of goods or products, they gain a city-wide specialization bonus, which increases their efficiency and their profit. City specialization can be assisted by setting up specialized industry areas, which harvest materials used by companies, gaining the city specialization bonus. Also, adjusting taxes should be favorable to those products and goods helps the industry develop even further. And that actually gives a boost for your specific specialization in the city. So this is also a very important thing to keep in mind and to basically use in your favor to get a bigger income from industry and commercial buildings. Now, all types of zoning have now from level 1 to 5. So before, offices, commercial, and industry would have just 3 levels. Now all of them have 5 building levels. And they represent the progression from a lower to a higher quality building, and also a reflection of how wealthy the inhabitants are on those buildings as well. So the higher the level, the higher the upkeep, and the higher the rent that you receive for that. The higher the level, the less electricity and water will be consumed as well. For commercial buildings and manufacturing or office buildings, the higher the level, the more goods will be produced, and the more goods and services will be produced. And they can also be sold at cheaper costs for customers, which in turn increase their the amount of sales that they do. And in terms of the signature buildings, we cover quite a lot of that in the review. But just to give you an example, so the sculptor mansion, it has 3 different requirements to unlock it. You need to reach a certain progression milestone. You need to have a specific citizen happiness level and have a number of sales zone with low density residential housing. And when you reach that, you can get the building and place that anywhere in the map. And the building cost is also free. And that'll be all for today. I really hope you enjoy this dev diary for zones and signature buildings. This is my review, everything that I noticed, everything that I want to talk about, and things that I believe will change completely on how we play the game, and a few things that are just a little bit of the same, but maybe just improved or just kept because they were still working in the previous game, which is all fine with me. But let me know in the comments what you think, if you've seen something that I might have missed, and maybe consider joining our Discord server where we keep sharing some of this information. We talk about our own builds on Cities Skylines 1 for now, and Cities Skylines 2 in the very near future, and we share screenshots, we ask questions, and we help solve problems and issues that sometimes we have in our cities. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.